Indie girl married by billionaire CEO. A twist of fate that changed everything. I just wanted to see the world one more time, before marrying a man he'd never seen. Her voice trembled through the hospital air as she clutched the necklace of the grandmother she'd saved. In a single act of kindness, she lost her sight, and gained a family that hid a secret behind every smile. Because the man they made her marry, he wasn't just older. He was the richest, coldest CEO in the capital. He had no intention of falling in love. But what happens when the girl no one saw coming becomes the only woman he can't look away from? The day she lost her sight was the day she saved a stranger's life. Emma Grace Holloway was just 20, working double shifts at a small diner in Savannah, Georgia, dreaming of one day leaving town with a nursing degree and a second-hand car. That morning, rain slicked the pavement. A woman, elderly, elegant, with silver hair pulled into a perfect twist, collapsed, right outside the diner door. While others froze, Emma ran. She reached her paternity just as a delivery truck turned the corner too fast. By the time the brakes scratched, the old woman was safe. Emma was blind. But when she woke up in the hospital, everything was black. No faces, no outlines, no future. And her mother? She wasn't holding her hand. He was in the hallway screaming about medical bills, screaming about how Emma had ruined everything by playing hero. The doctor said the surgery could help, but it cost nearly $500,000. Her mother said, "Use it for your brother's college fund. At least he's not a lost cause." Emma didn't cry. She never did. Not anymore. But the woman she saved? Became black. And she brought her grandson, a man who walked like he owned the world. Mr. Jack Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Holdings, billionaire, infamous in New York finance circles for his cold heart, unmatched strategy, and zero tolerance for distractions. He didn't want to be that, but he owed his grandmother his life. So when she said, "She saved me, you'll save her," he didn't argue. Jack offered to fund the surgery. Emma refused. "I won't be anyone's pity case," she said. So the grandmother made a quiet proposal, a secret only the three of them would know. And marry her. Jack laughed, but his grandmother didn't. And neither did Emma. Because this wasn't a story about love. Not yet. It was about survival. It was about two broken people, one who couldn't see and one who refused to feel. But even in darkness, a heartbeat still echoes. And sometimes the man who guards his soul the most is the one who loses it first. Chapter 1: The girl who couldn't see the man everyone feared. The first time Emma Holloway heard his voice, she was lying flat on a hospital bed, bandages tight around her head, and the world. "You saved her life," the man said. "We'll cover your medical bills." It wasn't gratitude. It was a transaction. His tone was clipped, professional, like he was closing a deal, not standing at the bedside of the girl who had thrown herself into traffic for his grandmother. Emma turned her face toward the sound, calm and unflinching. "And what do you expect in return?" A pause. Again, nothing. But it wasn't true. She heard it in the tension between his words, in the way his leather shoes shifted against the tile, as if he didn't belong here. In hospitals, in silence, in moments like this. "I don't want your charity," she whispered. Behind him, his grandmother stirred in her wheelchair and reached for Emma's hand with warm, trembling fingers. "Sweet girl," she said gently, "it's not charity, it's legacy." Emma didn't understand what that meant. Not then. But the deal came quickly in hushed tones. Marriage, she put Booker. He would receive surgery, security, and a chance to attend college. In exchange, she would bear his last name, Whitmore. A name like his meant press, questions, scrutiny. So it had to remain a secret. And Jack Whitmore? He didn't care what she looked like. He didn't need affection. All he wanted was to keep his grandmother calm and the tabloids quiet. They married on a Thursday. He wore a hospital gown. He didn't touch her hand. 12 days. Emma stood on the front steps of the Whitmore brownstone in Manhattan. It was too quiet, too cold, too polished. Her suitcase held everything she owned: 2 worn dresses, a stack of books she couldn't read anymore, and the lemon-scented blanket from her grandmother's house back in Savannah. The housekeeper, Marion, met her at the door. "You must be Emma," the woman said, voice brisk but kind. "I must be," Emma replied, her mouth twitching into a tired smile. Marion led her inside. The air smelled like white orchids and money. Emma reached out, fingertips brushing against the marble countertop as she found her way through the kitchen. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore? And now?" He nodded slowly. "Does he always speak like he's 3 steps ahead of everyone?" Marion laughed. "Jack Whitmore doesn't speak unless he has to, and when he does, people listen. Or they're fired." Emma blinked behind the darkness. "Sounds lonely." "He likes it that way." That night Jack returned late, as he always did. Emma sat at the kitchen table, a cup of tea untouched before her. When his footsteps approached, she didn't flinch. "You're still awake," he said, sounding mildly annoyed. "I couldn't sleep." "You need rest before the surgery." "I need to know who I'm married to." Another silence, then the scrape of a chair. Jack sat across from her. She could feel his presence, like a thundercloud in a quiet sky. "I'm not your enemy, Emma," he said. "No," she said softly. "You're just a stranger with a pen." That made him pause. "You didn't have to say yes." "I got 10 eyes," he admitted, "but I've lived in the dark long enough to know when a door opens, even if it's someone else's." Jack leaned back. "I don't want complications." "Neither do I." He stood. "Good. Then let's keep this clean." Later that week, a private car took her to the clinic. The surgery was scheduled at a renowned New York medical center, with a team flown in from Boston. As they prepped her, Emma asked one question. "Will I see again?" The nurse hesitated. "There's hope, but there are risks." Emma smiled gently. "There's always risk when you choose to see the world." As the anesthesia pulled her under, one final thought passed through her mind. What if I wake up and see the man I married? Back at the Whitmore estate, Jack stood at the window, watching the first winter snow dust the courtyard. His grandmother approached quietly, a shawl wrapped around his shoulders. "She reminds me of someone," she said softly, "someone who still believed in goodness." Jack didn't turn. Belief doesn't change facts. "No," she replied, "but love does." Somewhere in the darkness, Emma dreamed of lemon trees and hands she'd never seen, holding her steady as the world spun beneath her feet. She didn't know it yet. But the man everyone would become the only one who truly saw her. Chapter 2. The Man Who Hid Behind a Contract. The morning after the surgery, sunlight filtered through the curtains of the guest bedroom in the Whitmore brownstone. Emma didn't see it, not yet. Her eyes were still bandaged, her world still dark. But something had shifted. You could feel it in the air. Something out. What? Waiting. Across the hall, Jack Whitmore stared at his phone, ignoring a string of texts from board members and his ex-fiancée, Claire DuPont, who had recently resurfaced in society columns with the headline, "DuPont heiress reveals why she left billionaire Jack Whitmore at the altar." He didn't care what she said. He never did. What consumed his mind now was the girl sleeping under his roof, a girl who didn't flinch at his coldness, didn't ask him for anything, didn't seem interested in the life his last night could buy. He made him uncomfortable in a way nothing else could. When Emma finally stirred, she heard soft footsteps and the clink of porcelain. Marion's voice followed. "Morning, sweetheart. You made it through." Emma smiled, lifting her hand to her bandaged eyes. The world still quiet. "Well, that'll change soon. Doctor says the swelling needs a few days. But you're healing." Emma nodded, though her thoughts felt far from calm. Marion paused. "Mr. Whitmore? He's not the visiting type." Emma's smile tightened. "Of course he isn't." Later that evening, Jack stood by her doorway. He didn't knock, just lingered. "You can come in," Emma called softly. He stepped in, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. "How are you feeling?" like a girl who might open her eyes and realize she's legally tied to a man who won't even say her name. Jack sighed. Emma, get it? This was a contract. I'm not asking for affection, just honesty. Jack's jaw flexed. I'm not I am Fuyamo. Emma tilted her head, voice calm. You don't have to hide something you never reveal. That silenced him. He looked at her, not the bandages, not the fragility, but the girl underneath, the girl who somehow still had fire in her voice, even without sight. Finally, he said, I don't let people in, Emma. I don't have the luxury of mistakes. Everyone has the luxury of being human. He turned away. Turkovy turned out to be a movie curtain call he could flashback 2 years. The Whitmore estate glowed under candlelight. Jack stood before a sea of guests, his tux impeccable, his face blank. Claire never showed. Doing tux. You don't know how to love, Jack. I won't marry a ghost. He never spoke about that night again. Not to his grandmother. Not to the press. Not to himself. He buried it in work, in ice, in silence. Back in the present, Jack watched Emma's fingers trace the edge of her teacup. What did you say yes? He asked suddenly. Emma turned her face toward him. Because you offered something no one else ever did. A chance. You didn't even know me. I still don't, she said quietly. But your grandmother looked at me like I mattered. That was more than I'd ever gotten at home. Jack's voice lowered. They didn't treat you well? Emma shrugged. My mother always said I ruined her life. My father left when I was 7. After the accident, I think she saw the blindness as justice. He said nothing, but something inside him twisted. You've never asked for much, Jack, she said softly. I just want to stand on my own and see the sky again. Jack watched her for a long time. Then, almost involuntarily, he whispered, Do you like blueberries? Emma blinked. What? There's a patch in the garden, he said. When your vision comes back, I'll take you. The next morning, Jack Kusoti's meetings. Not all of them, just the ones that made his chest ache. He walked past the brownstone garden, watched the snow melt around the dormant blueberry bushes, and wondered what it would be like to live in a world where someone didn't expect him to fail. Emma Holloway had no power, no title, but somehow she saw deeper into him than anyone else ever had. And she couldn't even see him. Meanwhile, Emma sat at the window, fingers pressed to the glass. Marine, she asked quietly, what color is bowl? The older woman smiled. Gray skies, bare branches, but when it snows, everything glows white. Emma closed her eyes. That sounds. It will be, Marion replied, especially when you open your eyes and see the man everyone says has no heart, watching over you like you're the only thing that scares him. Some men build empires to hide their wounds. But Jock Whitmore was beginning to learn. No contract can protect you from the girl who makes you want to feel again. Chapter 3, The Moment. The wind curled softly along the stone walkways outside the Whitmore Innovation Tower, scattering dry leaves in spirals. Emily stood in the reception hall, clutching her portfolio against her chest. She wore a navy blouse, the same one she'd worn to her scholarship interview 3 years ago, a symbol of second chances, sewn at the collar by her grandmother's hand. Her vision was still dim in one eye. The doctors called it recovering sensitivity, but the world had started to return in fragments. Morning light through frosted windows, the way coffee steam danced upward, the reflection of her own silhouette in a passing bus mirror. She wasn't fully healed, not yet, but she was here. And so was he. The door opened, and for the first time, Emily truly saw him. Jack Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Enterprises. He was standing across the room, a stack of reports in his hands, but he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at her. Time didn't slow it. Jolie shut. She remembered his voice before his face. Deep, velvet-edged, always composed. That voice had guided her down cold hospital hallways, had whispered things like, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." But the man in front of her was not the same gentle stranger who had once knelt beside her hospital bed with a peeled orange and a book of poems. He was taller than memory allowed, The expensive suit cut sharply across his shoulders, but it was his eyes that struck her. Guarded, like someone who had once built walls for survival and had forgotten how to take them down. "Emily," he said, his voice quiet. "You made..." Her heart twisted, not because he sounded surprised, but because he sounded relieved. "Here for the design pitch," she replied, her voice flat, professional. Nothing more. She didn't want him to see the tremble in her fingers, or the way her breath caught at the edge of every syllable. He motioned toward the table. "Let's sit." Inside the conference room, she spread out her sketches, sustainable housing ideas for lower-income families, materials, costs, light placement. Her hands moved with purpose, but her mind, "Why didn't you tell me who you were? Why did you let me fall for a man who wasn't real?" Jack listened carefully. He nodded, asked questions. He never interrupted. And then he said the one thing she wasn't ready to hear. "You saved my grandmother's life. You gave her hope, but more than that, you reminded me who I used to be." Emily's throat went dry. She closed her folder. "This isn't personal, is it?" His eyes darkened. "Then why does it feel like it is?" A long silence passed between them, thick with memories she couldn't untangle. He stood. "I came here to pitch a project," she said, "not revisit a lie." He turned to leave, her heels clicking against the marble, but just before she reached the door, he spoke again. "I was never pretending with you." He didn't stop. She didn't look back. But outside the building, under the wide Oregon sky, her breath hitched, and tears she didn't permit herself to cry finally fell. Because in that one moment, the moment she saw him, she realized something terrifying. He still loved the man who saved her sight. And maybe he was the same man who could break her heart. Chapter 4. The truth he refused to speak. The Whitmore estate sat cloaked in late winter fog, the kind of morning where nothing was fully visible, not the horizon, not the heart. Jack Whitmore stood alone in the study, untouched coffee cooling beside a stack of legal documents. On the top page, her name was printed in delicate serif. Emily Grace Holloway Whitmore. Legally still his wife. Emotion, he wasn't sure anymore. He hadn't returned his calls. Not since the pitch. Not since she walked out of the room and left him staring at the empty space where her presence used to warm the air. And now, the house was too silent. Even the grandmother who once played matchmaker between them had stopped speaking about her brave girl. Because Emily had seen him. Really seen him. And he couldn't hide anymore. Meanwhile, in a corner apartment in Portland, Emily traced the edges of the ring box she kept hidden in her drawer. He had left it for her on the night of the surgery. No grand speech, no proposal, just a note tucked inside. "Will you ride to see me, all of me? I'll be here." He hadn't opened it since, because the truth wasn't just that he'd lied by omission. It was why hide his identity? Why pretend to be just Jack, when he was the man whose name lit up Wall Street? The deeper part of her, the wounded part, knew the answer. Because Jack Whitmore was terrified of being chosen for himself. And so he'd let her love a stranger, all while building walls between them. That night, Emily returned to the brownstone. But to forgive, not yet. But to confront the man who once held her hand in darkness, and then vanished when the light returned. Jack opened the door before she knocked. "You knew I was coming. I've been hoping every day since you left." Her voice was steady. "You owe me the truth, Jack." He stepped aside, let her in. The fire crackled in the hearth, the only warmth in the room. "I'll tell you," he said quietly, "but it won't make you hate me less." "I'm not here to hate you," she whispered. "I just want to stop lying to myself." They sat opposite each other on the worn leather couch. And for the first time, Jack spoke. "I was engaged once," he began. "Her name was Claire. On paper she was perfect. Legacy, elegance, a DuPont." Emily didn't move. She had heard the whispers, the society columns. "She left the night before the wedding," he continued, voice low. "Told me I had everything but a heart, that I couldn't love anyone because I didn't even like myself. He stared into the fire. She was right. I built this empire out of anger, out of needing to prove I wasn't my father. I thought love made men weak. And now Emily asked. Jack looked at her, for once not guarded, just tired. Now I know the weakness was thinking I could live without it. Silence stretched long between them. Then Emily said what she'd never dared before. When I lost my sight, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen, but it made everything else sharper. The way my mother used me, the way people pretended not to see me. He looked at him now, truly looked, and added, and the way you hid, even when I was holding your hand. Jack's throat worked hard. Well, I didn't think you'd choose me if you knew who I really was. And yet, she said softly, you were the first person I trusted, sight or no sight. He stood, crossed the space between them slowly, like a man approaching the edge of a cliff. Then he knelt, not with a rein, not with a plea, not with truth. I was afraid, he said, not of the world, not of failure, just of you seeing me, the broken, guarded, hollow man I'd become, because once you did, I thought you'd leave. Emily reached out, not to push him away, but to place her hand against his cheek. I did see you, Jack, long before I saw your face, and I stayed until you made me walk. Tears brimmed in his eyes, but he didn't wipe them. I want to try, he whispered, not to be perfect, but to be worthy of the girl who stepped into traffic for a stranger. He hesitated, then nodded. The truth first, then we'll see. Chapter 5. The lie she carried in silence. They began again in small ways. Emily moved back into the brownstone, not into the master bedroom, but into the guest room with the bay windows overlooking the city. Jack never pushed. He made her coffee in the morning, let her sit in silence if that's what she needed, and asked about her eyes but never about her heart. And Emily? He tried to forget the secret. He tried to forget the envelope tucked deep inside the drawer of her night. The one postmarked from Asheville, North Carolina. The one with handwriting she hadn't seen since the day she left home, and never looked back. She had promised herself she'd never open it, because inside was the truth, and she wasn't ready to ruin what they'd just started rebuilding. One afternoon, Jack found her in the rooftop garden. Her eyes were better now, still sensitive but healing. She sat cross-legged on the stone bench, a sketch pad in her lap. He leaned against the iron railing, watching her draw. Roses, he asked. He nodded. My grandmother's favorite. We used to have them lining the porch. Jack smiled. The one who raised you? She died the week before I got accepted into nursing school, she said quietly. It was the first letter I opened alone. He came closer. You never talk about your mother. He looked away because there's nothing to say that isn't painful. He didn't prick. But that night, in the quiet hum of the hallway, he paused outside her door and wondered what kind of girl builds a future while burying her past. Flashback. 5 years earlier. A rainy night. A girl with a suitcase. A small cabin tucked in the Appalachian foothills. You're not welcome here, her mother said, blocking the doorway. You made your choice when you took that scholarship, instead of your brother's bail. Emily stood, soaked and shaking. I didn't take anything, I earned it. You chose yourself. That's not what family does. The door slammed. Emily never went back. But she carried something from that night with her, something that whispered to her when the world got quiet. Her name, Liam. Back in the present, the envelope called to her. It had arrived 3 weeks ago, forwarded from her old address. Inside, a short note. He's 8 now. He asks about you. Why? Grace. Her aunt, her mother's estranged sister. And Liam, her little brother. The one she'd nearly raised before she left. He hadn't told Jack about him. Not when they first met. Not during the marriage. Not even after the truth about his identity came out. Because Liam came from a part of her life where love was weaponized, where sacrifices weren't honored, only expected. And she was terrified Jack would see her differently. But as the strong, steady woman she'd become, but as the girl who ran away from family. So she kept it buried. Another scar under her skin. One evening while Jack was preparing dinner, a quiet new ritual of theirs, he found the envelope. He hadn't meant to pry. He was looking for a flashlight in the hallway drawer. But there it was. Her name. He but Lacades. He didn't open it. But something in him twisted. And for the first time, he wondered what else she hadn't told him. Later, under warm kitchen light, Emily dried dishes beside him. Jack placed the unopened envelope on the counter between them. "I found this," he said gently. "You don't have to explain it, but I hope you will." Emily froze. A moment stretched. Then she spoke. "I have a brother," she whispered. "He was 4 when I left. Our mom. She's cruel, Jack, controlling, violent in quiet ways." He swallowed hard. "I raised him more than she did. I gave up college once before for him, but when my scholarship came, she told me if I left, I couldn't come back." Jack listened without interrupting. "So he left, and he've never stopped wondering what it did to him." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to think I was someone who walks away." Jack's expression softened, and he reached for her hand. "You didn't walk away, Emily. You survived, and sometimes that's the bravest thing anyone can do." He looked down, ashamed. "But I lied." He shook his head. "You protected a wound you weren't ready to expose. That's not lying. That's healing." He finally met his gaze. He wanted to see. Jack squeezed her hand. He would go. Chapter 6. The Trip That Changed Everything. The road to Asheville wound through the Blue Ridge Mountains like a ribbon of memory. Sharp turns, sudden drops, quiet valleys. Jack drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel. Beside him, Emily stared out the window, her fingers clutching a photograph she hadn't looked at in years. A little boy with ash-blonde curls and a crooked smile. "I don't know if he'll recognize me," she whispered. Jack glanced at her. "Maybe not with his eyes, but he'll know you with his heart." Emily looked down at the photo. He was 4. I used to sing to him when he had nightmares. Mom never heard. She slept like a rock, or pretended to. "You were his safe place," Jack said gently. "I'm not sure I still am." Jack didn't reply. He just reached across the console and took her hand. No promises, just presence. They arrived at Grace's house just before sunset. It was a small, sun-faded home on the edge of the forest, with chipped shutters and wind chimes that sang when the breeze stirred. Grace met them at the door, older than Emily remembered, gray in her hair now, but her eyes were still kind. She pulled Emily into a hug that smelled of lavender and wood smoke. "It's been too long," she said softly. Emily nodded, throat tight. "Thank you for taking care of him." Grace sighed sadly. "It wasn't a burden. He a good boy." Then her expression shifted, a flicker of something heavy in her eyes. "There's something I should tell before you see him." Emily tensed. Jack stood quietly behind her. Grace hesitated, then said, "Your mother's been writing to him, telling him you abandoned him, that you never looked back." Emily's stomach dropped. "What?" "I tried to undo the damage," Grace said quickly, "but he's old enough to wonder why you never called, never wrote, and I didn't know where you were until recently." Emily's legs felt unsteady. "I never stopped loving him," she whispered, "not for a second." "I know, but he's hurting." A small voice called from inside the house. "Aunt Grace, is she here?" Emily's heart stopped. "Liam." He stood in the hallway, tall for his age, skinny, with the same soft curls she remembered, but his eyes were sharper now, more guarded. He stared at her. Emily knelt down. "Hey, buddy." He didn't move. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner," she whispered. "I wanted to. I was scared you wouldn't want me anymore." Liam looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Mom says you forgot me." Emily's breath hitched. He crossed his arms. "Then why'd you leave?" Tears blurred her vision. "Because I thought getting out would help me come back stronger, so I could give you something better." "I didn't want better," he said softly. "I just wanted you." That broke him. She pulled him into her arms, sobbing into his shoulder. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Jack turned away, giving them space, but his eyes stung. This wasn't his story, but somehow it was changing him too. That night they stayed in town. Grace offered them the spare room. Emily tucked Liam into bed, just like she used to, with a story, a kiss on the forehead, and the old lullaby she thought she'd forgotten. As the melody faded, Liam asked, "Is the man with you your husband?" Emily hesitated. "Yes." "Is he nice?" He smiled. "He's trying really hard to be." Liam nodded okay. Out on the porch, Jack sat under the stars. Emily joined him, wrapping herself in a blanket. "You were incredible today," he said. "I felt like I was drowning. But you swam anyway." She leaned against him. "He's still mine, Jack. After everything, he's still my little brother." Jack looked at her. "You don't have to prove anything to me." He turned to him. "But I want, because this, what we're building, can't have secrets anymore." He nodded. They sat in silence as the wind whispered through the trees. Somewhere inside, Liam slept soundly for the first time in months. And Jack? He realized something he hadn't admitted aloud. He didn't just want to be Emily's husband in name. He wanted to be her family, to be Liam's, to be someone who didn't walk away when love got hard. The next morning, as the sun rose over the mountains, Liam handed Jack a drawing, through stick figures holding hands under a blue sky. "You can keep it," he said. Jack blinked hard. "Thanks," he said. "I will." Chapter 7. The Storm Before the Vows. The days after Asheville passed like a dream. Emily returned to the city with a quiet peace she hadn't known in years. Liam called every night. Jack had built a room in the brownstone just for him, painted in deep blues and forest greens. It was the first time Emily had seen Jack think not in numbers, but in comfort. He was falling in love again, not just with him, but with who he was becoming. And Jack, he had made up his mind. He no longer wanted a marriage built in shadows and contracts. He wanted a real vow, one spoken with light in their eyes. So he planned a quiet ceremony. A family talk, just truth. A second chance, this time chosen. But on the morning he picked up the rings, the storm returned. Her name was Claire DuPont, his ex-fiancée. The woman who once told him he was too cold to love, and walked out days before their wedding. The same woman who vanished from the headlines, until now. She showed up at the Whitmore office, dressed in soft gray silk and secrets. "You're getting married again," she said, without waiting for him to speak. Jack stood motionless behind his desk. "That's none of your concern." Claire stepped closer, eyes sharp. "But it should be, especially since you're marrying the girl who was all over the news after your grandmother's accident, the blind waitress, the one with the tragic little backstory." He clenched his jaw. "Don't talk about her," he whispered. "Because she saw the parts of you I couldn't? Or because you're still that same broken boy, desperate to prove he's more than his father's legacy?" He stared at her, stunned by the venom in her voice. "I came here to warn you," Claire added, "before it's too late." Jack's voice was ice. "Warn me about what?" "She's using you." Jack laughed once, low and dangerous. Claire's eyes narrowed. "You think just because she's kind and damaged that she's incapable of ambition? Wake up. Women like that always want something." He walked to the door and opened it. "Get out." He tilted her head. "You think you've found something real. But real love doesn't hide scars, Jack. It shows them. Loudly." "She does," he snapped. "She lives them." Claire paused. For just a moment something flickered in her eyes. Regret? Jealousy? "Just don't let her become your redemption," she said quietly. "You might wake up and realize she was your lesson instead." He left without another word, and Jack stood alone. That evening, Emily found him in the garden. "You're quiet," she said, sitting beside him. Claire came back. He said bluntly. Emily stilled. "Why? We want to poison everything we've built." Emily looked down. "And did she?" Jack reached into his coat and pulled out the small velvet box. He opened it, Inside sat two simple bands, brushed gold, no diamonds. "I don't want to run anymore," he said, "from who I was, from what we were." He looked at her, a voice steady. "I want you to wear this ring and know that it's not about guilt or owing you anything. It's because I love you, Emily. And if you still don't believe me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I believe you," she whispered, "but you have to know something too." He waited. She took a breath. "I'm not perfect. I still have scars. I still wake up some mornings and wonder if I deserve this kind of peace." "You do," he said instantly. She smiled. "Then let's build it together." He slipped the ring onto her finger, this time without a contract. No secrecy, just two people choosing each other in a world that never made it easy. But storms don't end just because you love through them. Sometimes they just pause before the next one strikes. And as Claire DuPont stared at the photos on her phone, Emily in Jack's arms, the ring on her finger, she didn't delete them. She forwarded them to a journalist, a family member, to someone who had every reason to expose Emily's past and tear everything apart. Chapter 8. The story the world wasn't supposed to know. It happened overnight. Emily woke up to the buzz of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. At first she ignored it, but the second time, then the third, her heart stirred with unease. He reached for it, still half asleep. The blonde waitress who married a billionaire. What is Emily Holloway hiding? The headline slapped her awake. He opened the article, and his stomach turned. There it was, her story. Or at least a version of it, twisted and baited for drama. Photos from her past, the rundown diner, the bruises on her arms that reporters speculated on but never truly understood, the scholarship rejection letter from when she was 17, even a court record sealed years ago when she'd tried and failed to file for guardianship of her little brother. And the anonymous quote at the bottom. She not some innocent girl, she left her family and never looked back. You don't just walk away from your blood. A source close to the Holloway family. Emily's hands trembled. She didn't need to ask who sent her. Her mother always knew how to twist a blade, and Claire had given her the handle. Downstairs, Jack was already dressed when she came down the staircase. His eyes met hers, tight, unreadable. "You seen it?" she asked. He nodded. He waited for the judgment, the questions, but instead he stepped forward and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't care what they print," he said, "but I care about you." Her voice cracked. "Jack, they're painting me like I used you. I know the truth. So do the people who matter." Emily shook her head. "You don't get it. The board, your investors, this isn't just gossip. They'll say I'm unstable, that I'm manipulating you, that I was after your name from the start." Jack's jaw tightened. "Let them. You can't say that. You have a reputation to protect." He reached for her hand. "So do you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I thought we could just start over, quietly, without all this noise." He pulled her into his chest. "We still can," he whispered, "but not if you—" But the storm only grew. By mid-morning, reporters were outside the brownstone. Paparazzi cameras flashed every time Emily stepped toward a window. Someone even broke into her high school records and published her essay titled "How I Survived My Mother." The words she'd written in desperation now turned into headlines like, "From abuse to billionaires. Is Emily Holloway's story too good to be true?" It wasn't a story anymore. It was a spectacle. And worst of all, someone leaked her location. That night, as Jack's security escorted her through the back entrance of his office tower, a woman from the crowd shouted, "You lied about your blindness too, huh?" Emily froze. Her vision was mostly healed now, but she still wore tinted glasses under bright lights. It was easier, safer. But now, even that was called a performance. That evening she sat in the dark of Jack's private office, curled on the leather couch, knees pulled to her chest. Jack turned from the window. "They're not just attacking me anymore. They're questioning you. Why you married me. If I trapped you, if I manipulated your grandmother. You didn't. I know that, she said, but truth doesn't matter when the narrative's already sold. Jack sat beside her, quiet for a long moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. I once paid someone to disappear. She turned to him, stunned. To Claire left, a reporter found something about my father's offshore accounts. It wasn't illegal, but it would have damaged the company. I paid him to walk away, to forget it because I didn't want to be humiliated. He looked at her then, full. I'm not that man anymore. I'm not going to hide. He swallowed hard, even if it cost you everything. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Then, quietly, she asked, what do we do now? We told your story, he said, not theirs. The next day, Jack Whitmore did something unthinkable. He scheduled a press conference. Not about quarterly earnings, not about acquisitions, but about Emily. In front of 30 reporters and hundreds of thousands streaming online, he stood at a podium, his voice steady. I've built companies. I've survived boardroom betrayals and personal heartbreak, but I have never been prouder of anything in my life than being the husband of Emily Grace Holloway. He paused, looked directly into the cameras. The woman you've spent the last 48 hours dissecting is the bravest person I've ever met. She survived things no child should. She protected her brother when no one else would. She worked 3 jobs while half blind and never once asked for pity. He let that hang in the air. She didn't marry me for my money. I married her for her strength. The crowd was silent. And somewhere in the back row, a single reporter stood and clapped. Then another. Then another. Until the room filled with something Emily hadn't felt in days. Humanity. Later that night, back in the brownstone, Emily turned to Jack beneath the soft lamplight. You didn't have to do that. He brushed her hand with his thumb. I knew. He smiled faintly. Thank you. He kissed her forehead. Next time the world tries to rewrite our story, we'll just write a louder chapter. Chapter 9. The Promise Made in the Garden. It was late spring when Jack took her back to the rooftop garden. The city buzzed below them, oblivious, but up here time slowed. Emily stood barefoot on the stone path, her hands brushing over the blooms that had started to open again. Lavender, hydrangea, and the delicate white roses she had asked Jack to plant months ago. Everything she thought she'd lost had somehow begun to return. And still, she didn't quite know what to do with peace. Jack appeared behind her, holding 2 cups of tea. You're quiet, he said softly. In trying to remember what it feels like, she murmured. What does being safe? Jack handed her the cup and let the silence linger. He didn't press. He didn't fix. He simply stood beside her, shoulder to shoulder, like a man who had learned that presence was a better promise than words. But tonight he had both. They sat on the old bench at the edge of the rooftop, the one that overlooked the Whitmore Tower skyline. Wind swept through the tall grasses and played gently with the ends of her sweater. Jack cleared his throat. There's something I want to give you. Emily looked at him, amused. Another ring? He smiled. No, not yet. From his coat pocket he pulled a folded piece of paper, worn around the edges. She took it carefully. It was a blueprint, not of a building, but of a small 1-story cottage. Open porch, long windows, wildflower garden around the edges. What is this? It's ours, he said quietly. It's in Vermont. I bought the land last year. After Asheville, I thought maybe someday we'd need a place that didn't belong to headlines or boardrooms. Emily stared at the drawing. Her voice trembled. I want us to have a place where Liam can visit, where you can build something that's yours, where no one sees us as a headline, just as people. She reached over and placed her hand over his. You've already given me so much. This, he said, isn't about giving, it's about growing. They sat in silence a while longer, until the stars began to press through the velvet sky. Emily turned toward him. You never told me what changed. Jack tilted his head. You decided you wanted more than just a marriage of names. He looked at her for a long moment, then answered. It wasn't one moment, it was 1,000. The way you opened your mail like it was a war. The way you tucked your napkin into your lap even when we ate pizza. The way you protected your brother, and still apologized for not doing enough. His voice softened. You made me want to be a man who deserved someone like you. Emily's eyes welled. You already are. He stood then, slow and certain, and reached into the planter beside the roses. From beneath the soil he pulled a small glass jar. Inside, a piece of parchment rolled tight, bound with twine. He unrolled it and I promise to build with you, not just for you. He promised to never use silence as a shield. He promised to love your scars as much as your smiles. And he promised to always come home, not just to a place, but to you. Emily swallowed hard. And to sit, he thought. Jack smiled. Then I promise you my life. He took his hand. And I'll promise mine. But even as the stars above bore witness to a quiet forever, a shadow waited beyond the light, because someone was watching. And someone had no intention of letting this story end in peace. Chapter 10. The day everything almost fell apart. It happened on the day they were supposed to visit the cottage in Vermont for the first time. Emily had packed snacks. Jack had canceled meetings. The air was full of hope and wild possibility. But the call came at 8:12 a.m. Jack was pouring coffee when his phone lit up. The unsuccessful knob. He almost ignored it. He wished he had. If we disguised, check your inbox, Mr. Whitmore, and ask your wife if she's told you everything. In silence, Jack's gut tightened. He opened his email. It touched a sealed court file, a hospital discharge summary, and a photo. A younger Emily, bruised, carrying a toddler, running. The document was dated 2 years before they met. He'd filed a restraining order against a man named Nathaniel Moore. And withdrew it. The photo showed her standing outside a hospital at night, with Liam in her arms. And in the background, Claire DuPont. Emily heard the silence before she saw his face. Jack stood frozen in the kitchen, coffee untouched, phone still glowing in his hand. Jack. He didn't look at her. I got a call, he said. An email. Her heart clenched. From who? He turned the phone toward her. He saw the image, the file. Her world tilted. I was going to tell you, she said quietly. Whip off, he asked, voice sharp. After the ceremony? After the house? He stepped forward. Please, let me explain. Then do it, he said, because right now I'm standing here wondering who I married. Emily's voice cracked. I was 19. I had just moved in with a friend. Her brother said he could help get me work. He didn't. He swallowed hard. He locked me in a motel room, told me no one would care, that I'd brought it on myself. I escaped after 3 days and ran straight to the hospital. Jack's face hardened. And Claire? He worked there, volunteering. She saw me, helped me. But he looked away. He turned it into leverage. Jack's expression faltered. Leverage? She'd told me not to file charges. Said if I did, the tabloids would find it and she'd make sure the courts sided with him. She said it would ruin my chances at school, at a job. She said if I wanted to be invisible again, I'd better disappear. Emily's voice shook. Again. The silence after that was unbearable. Jack walked away, not storming, just... Emily sank to the floor, arms around her knees. Not because he didn't believe her, but because he did. And it hurt. Hours passed. He didn't come back. Emily sat by the garden bench that evening, the light fading behind the city skyline, the promise of Vermont a distant ache in her chest. And just when she thought it was over, he appeared. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled, his eyes rimmed with pain and something worse. Guilt. I'm sorry, he said, for doubting you, for demanding your whole story when I never really offered mine. He stood slowly. You were scared? He nodded. So were you. Then he stepped forward. I want to be the man who holds your past like it's holy, not shameful. I want to be the one who hears your story and says, "You lived through that? And you're still here? That makes you the strongest woman I've ever known." He had forgotten before he could stop them. "I'm tired, Jack," she whispered. "So am I," he said, "but if I have to spend the rest of my life rebuilding your trust, brick by brick, I will." He reached into his pocket. Not a ring this time. He photographed the woman of hurrying Lee up. He'd laminated it. "It's the first thing that made me fall in love with you," he said, "because I saw someone protecting someone smaller, even when no one protected her." She broke, and he held her. The next morning they didn't go to Vermont. Instead, they stood barefoot in the garden, hands intertwined, and read their vows under the cherry blossom tree that had just started to bloom. No crowds. No cameras. It's just truth. Jack's grandmother was there, beaming. Liam ran down the steps, holding the rings. And in a voice that didn't shake anymore, Jack whispered, "I promise to never run from your pain. I promise to hold your story like it's my own. And I promise no matter what tries to break us again, I will always choose you." Emily replied, "You saw me before I saw myself. You stayed, even when I was drowning. And though I know, this was never just survival. It was love. It caught up at the It wasn't the mansion. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the headlines that faded faster than the bruises ever did. It would stayed, was the morning. One quiet Sunday. The sun rose gently over the Vermont cottage Jack had built from blueprints and hope. Emily stepped barefoot onto the porch, wrapped in a soft robe, the air cool against her cheeks. A mug of chamomile on her hand. Birdsong in the tree. And next to her the sound of a little boy laughing, running through the tall grass with a stick in one hand and a wooden sword in the other. Behind her, Jack stepped out, still barefoot, still quiet in the way only he could be. "Sleep okay?" he asked. Emily smiled. "Better than I used to dream." He wrapped his arm around her waist, kissed her temple. And for the first time she let herself believe this wasn't temporary. It was hers. Not borrowed. Not owed. Not earned through pain or performance. Hers. That afternoon, Emily opened the final drawer in the house she hadn't yet touched. Inside it, the sealed envelope she'd kept hidden for years. The one that once made her feel small, weak, unworthy. He held it in her hands for a moment. He walked to the fire. Jack watched from across the room but said nothing. She didn't open it. He burned it. Because some scars didn't need to be read aloud to be healed. And some stories are better closed than carried. That even, under the stars, Liam asked her, "Do you remember when you were blind?" Emily looked up at the sky, the velvet block scattered with stars. "Yes," she said softly. "Were you scared?" "What made it better?" He glanced at Jack, who was grilling dinner with charcoal on his cheeks and the most ridiculous apron on earth. Then she looked at her brother. "You," she said, "and a man who saw me before I ever saw myself." Years later, Emily became a nurse. Jack supported women's shelters across the country. Liam graduated with a full scholarship. And that Vermont cottage became a haven for them, but for anyone who needed to believe again. People still asked about their story sometimes. But Emily never told it the way the tabloids did. She told it like a parable, like a song about a girl who lost her sight and gained everything worth seeing. True love doesn't require a perfect past, only a heart that keeps choosing. And forgiveness, it's the sunrise that follows the longest night. If this story touched your head, if you've ever carried pain in silence, if you've ever wondered whether someone could love all of you, then share this story with someone who once believed they were too much or not enough. Because sometimes the only thing we need is someone who sees our worth when we've forgotten how to look. Leave a comment below. What did you see when your eyes were finally opened? Your story could be the sunrise someone else is waiting for.